Well, it's good to be home. It's good to be home. I grew up just an hour from here, and it feels good to be able to come back home and to see that the struggle here in Memphis is still continuing. So before I say anything at all, I want to give respect to this organization, Grassroots Leadership, and Cy Khan. Many of you may not know that there has been a heroic struggle being waged in this city. The future of this city is hanging in the balance. There are forces at work, the same forces who Dr. King stood against in this very city, who want to make Memphis the home to the biggest private for-profit prison in the world. And that struggle to create a huge slave ship on dry land called the private prison, that struggle to begin to profiteer on human suffering, that struggle that's being waged against any sense of decency to create a new Jim Crow. You don't have to call somebody the N-word if you can call them a felon, you see. You don't have to call them the N-word. You can just call them a felon. The fight against this new Jim Crow, this punishment industry, where for-profit prison companies are now being traded on the stock exchange, Wackenhut and Correctional Corporation of America turning Dow Jones into a high-tech slave auction. That struggle is being met as it was met 40 years ago by valiant struggle, and I give my honor and my support and my appreciation to Cy Khan and the Grassroots Leadership. And we should all support them in their fight. So the struggle continues, and we're getting ready now to go back to our homes. And many of you are going back. You've had a few days away. You got a chance to speak on some panels, listen to some panels, skip some panels, skip a lot of panels. And you are going now home. You're going back to deadlines that are hard to meet, payrolls that are hard to meet. Some of you activists and advocates going back to policymakers that are hard to meet. And you might have to get a little rowdy to be heard, and I understand. And I know at the end of a conference you can sometimes feel the agenda is so widespread and people are so all over the place, and did I really make my point, and are we going to get anywhere? There's so many different issues, and we're so scattered out, and the enemy seems so big, and are we going to get anywhere? And I just want to say to you, I want to remind you, doesn't this feel a little familiar? I'm not talking about just the 60s, when it seemed impossible, or apartheid in South Africa when it seemed impossible and we came through. I mean, doesn't this seem familiar from 2 years ago? 2 years ago, weren't we the people who were walking around with our lips poked out 2 years ago? Weren't we the people who were crying in our soup, crying in the cafes, threatening to lead a country? Weren't we those people just 2 years ago? 2 years ago, I'm going to leave, I'm going to move to Canada. Like they want you in Canada. They don't want you. They want you right here doing what you're doing. And yet, if you had told me, and if we had told you, that in just 24 months, George Bush's polling numbers would be in the toilet in Tennessee in the red states. If we had told you that in just 24 months, 6 years of one-party authoritarian rule would be shattered, if we had told you that in just 24 months, Donald Rumsfeld would be home watching you on TV, You wouldn't have believed it. And when I tell you that Josh Silver and the Free Press folks and the Malkia Cereals and those people, and I'm not talking about in 2 years, I'm talking about April, I'm talking about this year, I'm talking about 2007, that this will be the tipping point year for this media justice movement, this media reform movement, this media and democracy movement. You don't believe me, but I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you the truth. First of all, look at what you have already done. When I say we did it, I don't mean people you don't know. When I say we defeated the authoritarians, we don't have a perfect society, we don't have utopia, but we got to claim our victories as we get them. And we beat the authoritarians. Our pro-democracy movement beat the authoritarians, and I don't mean people you don't know. And I don't mean people who's not in this room. 24 months ago, the blogosphere was not even a factor. We have built a progressive infrastructure online that now rivals the right-wing talk radio in its impact. We've done that in 24 months. That's an incredible accomplishment in any society, to build a rival communications apparatus to the authoritarians. And our pro-democracy movement has achieved that. Look at the documentaries that we've produced. Certainly Robert Greenwald gets a lot of attention, but many of you in this room have produced brilliant, beautiful, breakthrough media that has continued to eat away at public support for this unjust, despicable war. And you're just getting started. And you're just getting started. Al Gore, not the most sexy man in America, took a PowerPoint presentation, certainly not the coolest of all the technological tools. I mean, I'm just observing. And has upended the discussion on climate chaos and climate crisis and climate change inside a year. That's the power of the media. I don't have to tell you about our musicians, our poets, our rappers, our radio gorillas like Amy Goodman, who's here, who have done, yes, who's here, who have used the airwaves and the human voice to call this country back to its best self, despite the blackout and the blockout by the mainstream media. I don't have to tell you about the beauty of this movement. And now look at what's happening. You see, there was a guy that everybody thought might be a Republican president who slipped on a macaca. And thanks to YouTube, which was created by some guys a couple of blocks from my house on top of a pizzeria, and nobody had ever heard of it a month and a half ago, the U.S. Senate is now in the hands of the Democratic Party. Yeah. 24 months ago, you had never heard of a macaca or a YouTube. That's how fast this thing is happening. I hadn't either. But, and you're beginning now to see the coalescence. Is that a word? The coalescence? Coalitionizing? Coalescence. You're beginning to see, help me, you're beginning to see hybrids and coalescences of stuff and things. Like Video the Vote. Like Video the Vote. We are stunned by the continued genius of James Rucker in our community. He was with MoveOn.org, African-American brother, helped make that happen. After Katrina jumped in, helped make Color of Change happen. Now, Video the Vote. What was that? How do you even describe the potential that we now have at our hands? Video the Vote. James partnered with MoveOn. They sent out the word from MoveOn, said, we want to be able to use the video cameras that you have in your house right now to protect democracy all around the voting booths. We want you to sign up. And more than 1,000 people said they were willing on Election Day to just pick up their video camera, pick up their cell phone video camera, and be deployed at a moment's notice. And more than 100 people were. And they rushed into action. And they videotaped what was going on with voter disenfranchisement and people being lied to at the voting booths. And suddenly, someone who's been able to discourage people from voting all morning, 11:15, here comes video the vote with a video camera. And all of a sudden they found, the paperwork. Oh, you're right. Oh, you're right. Yeah, they can vote. So funny I didn't see that. Is that activism? Is that media? When CNN began to pick up on it and said, thank you, because we don't have enough cameras anymore to go to all the places we're hearing about, but you have an unlimited number of cameras. Is that media activism? What is it? It is the beginning of a new modality of pro-democracy activity that blurs the lines between high technology, it was distributed online, media content production, media activism, political activism. We are the foreground, the vanguard of a new pro-democracy movement in this country. High tech, high touch, high principles, and on our way to high goals and aspirations for this country. But lest we forget, where did it start? Where did this authoritarian movement that had taken over and taken advantage first slip? Katrina. Bush's presidency drowned in the floodwaters of Katrina. And just as the YouTube macaca incident shows the continuing presence of racism in our politics, but also the continuing power of anti-racism as a motivating, animating force. The fact that when America saw people, an American city drowning, an American city underwater, and poor and black people left behind, something happened in this country. The media was caught off guard. They didn't have nobody give them a script. And they had to report what they saw. And when you saw people left behind, waving American flags on top of roofs, holding babies, when you saw people left behind, something in the hearts of this country was touched. Because for years we've been sold this conservative right-wing ideology of sink or swim, let people sink or swim, let them sink or swim. And then you saw it. You saw people sinking. People saw their sisters and brothers sinking. And in their hearts, they said, no, this is not the country that I want. And it rehumanized for a moment the black poor, but it did something else. It rehumanized the people on the other side of the camera. It rehumanized the mainstream media. And when you saw Anderson Cooper on the verge of tears and Geraldo Rivera crying, they were rehumanized by an engagement with the poor. They were rehumanized. And so the power, the moral power, of having a movement that's engaged with the poor, with the forgotten, with the left out, with the disenfranchised. That is what began the slide that George Bush has never recovered from. So why don't we do more than we have to stay engaged and to stay involved? And I appreciate Malkia for being a moral conscience for this movement. And we need to give her a round of applause. We need to give him a round of applause. for being a moral, continuing to bring us back and bring us back and bring us back. It's not charity. It's not charity. When we reach out, it invigorates our movement, and that's when we begin to win. Now, as I move to my close, I have to confess. Last night, I got a little hungry. Me and Jeff Pearlstein got in the car, and we went to Wendy's. And I know it was wrong. I knew it was wrong when I went. And we went, but we did. And I know we should have gone to Beale Street and patronized, or we should have eaten some vegetarian food, or whatever you're going to say. But we went to Wendy's. And this is relevant because when we got there, we went in the store, and I'm hungry, and I didn't notice the guy behind the counter. And I'm looking up, and I'm trying to figure out what to order. And then I look, and do you know who it was who was serving behind the counter at Wendy's? It was Donald Rumsfeld. Donald Rumsfeld. And I said, Mr. Rumsfeld, what are you doing serving fast food at Wendy's in Memphis? And he said, well, you know, Van, I'm out of work. I said, well, what do you think now? What do you think? And he said, he lied, but he said, it would have gone fine, it would have gone well, you see. But we were unprepared for our catastrophic success in Iraq. We were just so successful that we just hadn't thought about the successful aftermath, and that's when it all kind of got a little bit difficult. But that's what happened. We just weren't prepared for our success. It wasn't that I screwed anything up. And I said, okay, look, I want a double cheese. And you know, cause he's lying again. But I thought about it in the car. And I'm thinking about it now. What if this movement succeeds? What if this movement succeeds? Are we prepared for our own success? Can we write that story of what it looks like when we succeed? It does no good to win on net neutrality if net neutrality winds up having a neutral impact on the lives of the people, you see. It does no good. It does no good. This movement, not just the Malkias, but this entire movement now, as we're beginning to get into a place of real power and real momentum and possible great breakthrough, dramatic success, we have to begin to say, what is our agenda? And is our agenda inclusive enough yet? Will our success lift up enough people? I would argue that fighting not just at the FCC, as important as that is, but fighting to make sure that every local city and municipality is making free broadband available to everybody has to be number one on our agenda. It has to be. First of all, as you see with the climate change movement, as you see with that incredible initiative, 300 plus cities first signed Kyoto. And that has created the infrastructure and the backbone to now begin to move Congress. So fighting city by city for an access agenda gives us the backbone to win in D.C. So it's incredibly important that we take that seriously. It's also not just enough to have the broadband there and people don't have the hardware, they don't have the training to take advantage. And so we've got to be able to say that every American child in every public school has a right to a top-notch, first-level, world-class media education to compete in the media world and the information economy. That's a right. And when we say that, we can go to Silicon Valley and Hollywood and urban school teachers and create a beautiful coalition to make that happen. The last thing I want to say in terms of thinking about where this movement is going is that when we look at the FCC, there's a reason that you can't go into urban America and say, I am here to warn you about the FCC, and get anybody to give one damn about what you're saying. It's not because people are so stupid that they just don't understand. It's because ain't nobody on the FCC that has any remote love or heart or care or concern for the people in the community that is visible. There are no visible people on the FCC. There are good people there who are getting beat up, but there are no visible people. We have to begin to say that we want Davy D on the FCC. We have to say we want Davy D on the FCC. Some of you are saying, who the hell is Davy D? That's the point. Davy D is a hip-hop historian of the first order. Davy D has worked for Clear Channel and Pacifica. Davy D is a walking library of deep critical analysis of grassroots politics, etc. If you said in Vibe magazine and Source magazine that Davy D demands to be put on the FCC, you would have Mos Def, you would have every major political African-American entertainer in America marching about the FCC. Those are the kinds of demands that we need to begin to push forward. We want Davy D on the FCC. We want Davy D on the FCC. We want Davy D on the FCC. Now, you see, now, I'm not even a rapper. I was just, but hey, that's how this movement is going. I'm not even a hip-hop type of guy, but it's all just merging and coalescing. And that's where we're going to go. And let me say something about this movement. Internally and externally, we are beautiful, gaining momentum. Something happens to a movement about this time. You get 3,000 people to come to Memphis for this. Something's about to happen. And I want to just point out something. We have a tendency sometimes to be very critical, to be very harsh with each other. You take the free press. Oh, they're the big guys, and damn them, and they got all the money, and like that. The FC, the free press. They're the teeny little bitty guys with the 48,000 lobbyists they have in D.C. We need to hug them, hold them. We tend to be critical, harsh. We want to hold each other accountable by doing this and not like this. You see, you hold people accountable. So I want to encourage, as we get bigger, I want to encourage the people who have so much of the access and the privilege to really understand that on the one hand, yes, there are people who are above you are bigger and stronger, and you got to deal with them, but the people behind you who need your love and your support and your investment, you see. And RFK, who also died the same year as MLK, he was a son of privilege, but he allowed himself to go to Appalachia, and he went to sit with the farm workers, and he went to Harlem, and he let his heart get broken open. And so when he took a stand, it wasn't just, I'm just do the minimum I can to keep the Negro satisfied. I'm going to do the minimum I can, and then try to appease. No, he said, I'm going to take this on myself. And we want for the giants in this movement to take the inclusion issue on as if it's their own, deep in their heart, deep in their soul. And we want to love each other and help each other all to get there together. That's number one. And number two, Martin Luther King Jr. didn't get famous giving a speech called, I have a complaint. That wasn't a speech. I have a critique. I have a long list of issues about which I am thoroughly pissed off. And I insist that you listen to me in case you were having a good day. Right? That wasn't a speech. The brother had a dream. And we have dreams. Beautiful dreams, hopeful dreams, helpful dreams. Dreams about a country coming back together to put its arms around our toughest problems. Every race, every class, every religion in the world is here. So we have the opportunity to test pilot the best solutions to our biggest problems. And the reason that we want this pro-democracy movement is because we believe that this country can lead the world, but not in war, not in pollution rates, not in incarceration rates. We believe we can lead the world in clean and green technology. We believe we can lead the world in a green growth agenda and figure out an alternative to oil and share it with India and share it with China so they can boot up clean and don't do what we did. We believe we can be that kind of country, and we need to be able to have a movement that stands for that. So I say to you in closing that we have to be real careful now what kind of stories we telling each other and about each other now. We can all do better. I expect a lot from the big folks in this movement and from the little folks in this movement. I expect a lot from this movement. I expect us to come together. And I expect that we will be as wise as my son, who's 2.5. Whenever I go to read him a book, he'll let me read Chicken Little, but only a couple of times. He only wants to hear The Sky is Falling a couple of times. But I can read him that story about the little engine that could all day long. Let's be that little engine that could. Thank you very much. We can do this. We can do this. Thank you.